The hardest $100,000 you will ever earn is the first one. Not because the math is complicated, but because in the beginning, the math is working against you. Imagine standing beside a rocket on launch day. It weighs millions of pounds, and its engines produce more power than almost anything humans have ever built. And yet, for the first few moments, it barely moves. Almost all of its fuel is burned fighting a single force: gravity. Not traveling through space, not reaching the moon, just escaping the ground. Once it reaches orbit, everything changes. The engines don't suddenly become stronger. The rocket simply stops fighting the force that was holding it back. Building wealth follows the exact same law. Charlie Munger once said, "The first $100,000 is a nightmare, but you have to do whatever it takes to get there." Most people hear that and assume he was talking about discipline. He wasn't. He was talking about physics, financial physics. Today, we're going to uncover the invisible force that quietly keeps millions of hardworking people financially stuck, even when they save, invest, and do almost everything they're supposed to do. I call that force financial gravity, and once you see it, you will never look at your paycheck the same way again. Meet Ethan. He's 28 years old. He has a stable job, and he pays every bill on time. He isn't addicted to shopping, and he isn't drowning in debt. He's doing exactly what personal finance books tell him to do. Every month, he saves what he can. He invests consistently, and he waits patiently. And yet, after years of doing everything right, his progress feels almost invisible. His investment account grows, but never fast enough to change his life. His salary increases, but his financial freedom doesn't. Some months, it feels like he's climbing a mountain made of sand. Every step forward slides halfway back down. If you've ever felt that way, it's probably not because you're failing. It's because you're still fighting financial gravity. Here's what almost nobody tells you. When you're starting from zero, your investments aren't your biggest wealth-building tool. You are. Imagine Ethan finally saves his first $5,000 and invests every dollar. The market has an incredible year, 10%. His reward? $500. Objectively, that's a good return. Psychologically, it feels meaningless. $500 doesn't replace his paycheck, it doesn't pay his rent, and it doesn't buy back his time. So his brain reaches a dangerous conclusion. This isn't worth it. That's the trap. People don't quit investing because compound interest doesn't work. They quit because compound interest feels invisible before it becomes powerful. The first phase of wealth building isn't about watching your money multiply. It's about surviving long enough for multiplication to matter. And that's why so many people lose the game before the game has actually started. They expect their investments to carry them, when their investments are still too small to carry themselves. Before your portfolio becomes powerful, your paycheck is the engine, which means the single most important question isn't, how can I earn a higher return? It's, how much fuel reaches the engine every month? Unfortunately, most people answer the wrong question. They declare war on coffee, on streaming subscriptions, on eating lunch out. They spend enormous amounts of mental energy trying to save tiny amounts of money. It feels productive, it feels responsible, it even feels disciplined. But mathematically, it's like trying to launch a rocket by making it 1 pound lighter. You're solving the wrong problem. Because rockets don't reach orbit through tiny improvements. They reach orbit by removing massive amounts of weight. And that's the moment Ethan stops asking, where can I save another $20? Instead, he asks a completely different question. What is the heaviest thing I'm carrying? That single question changes everything. For Ethan, the answer isn't difficult to find. It isn't coffee. It isn't takeout. It isn't the occasional vacation. It's the same expense that quietly dominates almost every household budget: housing. Every single month, before Ethan has the chance to build wealth, $2,000 disappears into rent. For years, he never questioned it. It was close to work. It was comfortable. It looked like progress, but comfort has a habit of disguising cost. At first, the idea of moving feels like failure. Getting a roommate feels like moving backwards. And a smaller apartment feels like admitting he isn't successful. Then Ethan realizes something that changes his perspective forever. He's been trying to achieve two completely different goals at the exact same time. He wants to look financially successful and become financially successful. Those goals sound similar, but they're often opposites. So Ethan makes a decision that almost nobody notices, but his future self will never forget. He moves. His monthly housing cost falls from $2,000 to $1,200. His salary doesn't change. His boss doesn't give him a raise. The stock market doesn't suddenly take off. Yet something remarkable happens. Every month, an extra $800 stays in his account, nearly $10,000 every year, without working another hour, without cutting another coffee, without relying on discipline. One structural decision quietly creates more wealth than hundreds of tiny budgeting decisions ever could. That's the first crack in financial gravity. Not because Ethan became richer, but because he became lighter. And once you start looking through that lens, you notice something surprising. The people who build wealth fastest rarely obsess over tiny expenses. They obsess over the handful of decisions that repeat every single month. Housing, transportation, taxes, debt. Those are the levers that actually move the machine. Everything else is mostly noise. Ethan decides to pull another lever: taxes. Most people see taxes as money that's simply gone forever, but the wealthiest households often think differently. They ask a better question: how much of this money can legally stay invested instead? So Ethan increases his contributions to a traditional retirement account. Now every dollar he invests becomes more efficient. Part of the money that would have disappeared to taxes stays inside the machine instead. He didn't discover a loophole. He simply stopped taking the most expensive route. Building wealth isn't always about earning more. Sometimes it's about making every dollar travel farther. Month after month, his system keeps running. Money leaves his paycheck automatically, and his investments grow quietly. The process is boring, predictable, almost invisible, which is exactly why it works. The greatest wealth-building systems usually don't feel exciting. They feel automatic. Slowly, almost without noticing, Ethan begins building something far more valuable than a larger portfolio: momentum. Then life rewards him for all the work he's been doing. His manager calls him into the office with good news: a promotion, a bigger salary, the kind of moment most people spend years hoping for. For a few minutes, everything feels different. Then financial gravity changes form, because the moment your income rises, it stops attacking your wallet and starts attacking your expectations. Suddenly, the apartment that felt perfectly fine yesterday feels too small. The car that's never given you a problem starts looking outdated. Restaurants you once considered expensive now seem completely reasonable. Nothing around Ethan actually changed. Only the number on his paycheck did. But somehow, that single number makes his old life feel smaller. That's the real danger of lifestyle inflation. It doesn't arrive looking irresponsible. It arrives looking deserved. And that's exactly why it's so powerful. Most people never notice the moment it happens. They don't wake up one morning and decide to waste money. It happens quietly. One upgrade becomes the new normal, then another, until the lifestyle they once dreamed about becomes the lifestyle they can no longer afford to lose. That's how someone earning twice as much as they did 5 years ago can still feel trapped by every paycheck. Financial gravity didn't disappear. It simply found a different way to pull. Ethan refuses to let that happen. So he creates one rule, not 10 rules, not a complicated budget, just one. Every time his income goes up, before he upgrades a single part of his life, half of every raise gets invested automatically. The other half is his to enjoy. He still celebrates. He still travels. He still buys things he genuinely values, but he never lets his lifestyle grow faster than his assets. Every raise increases two things at the same time: his standard of living and his future freedom. Year after year, the gap between what Ethan earns and what Ethan spends quietly becomes larger, and that invisible gap becomes the engine behind everything that follows. For a long time, the progress still feels slow. Some years the market rises, some years it falls, and there are months when Ethan wonders if any of it is making a difference. Then one ordinary Tuesday, he opens his investment account, and the number on the screen reads $100,000. Nothing dramatic happens. His phone doesn't congratulate him. His neighbors don't suddenly respect him more. Tomorrow morning, he'll still wake up and go to work. But underneath the surface, the mathematics of his life have fundamentally changed. Imagine the market earns 10% over the next year. A $100,000 portfolio can produce roughly $10,000 without Ethan working overtime, without asking for another promotion, without sacrificing another weekend. For the first time, his money has become a meaningful contributor. That is financial escape velocity. Until this moment, Ethan carried the machine. From this moment forward, the machine begins carrying Ethan. That's why Charlie Munger called the first $100,000 a nightmare. Not because it's the finish line, but because it's the point where the rules begin to change. The first $100,000 may take 7 years. The second might take 3. The third could take even less. Not because Ethan suddenly became a better investor, not because he found a secret stock, but because every dollar inside the machine is now helping create the next one. The rocket has finally reached orbit. And once you're in orbit, your greatest job isn't making the engine bigger. It's making sure you never shut it off. That means staying invested, especially when everyone else is panicking. Ignoring the temptation to chase every hot stock or predict every market crash. Keeping investment costs low, because small annual fees quietly compound into enormous losses over decades. And reinvesting the income your portfolio generates, instead of treating it like spending money before the machine is fully built. None of those decisions feel exciting. And that's exactly the point. The people who build extraordinary wealth usually aren't making extraordinary predictions. They're making ordinary decisions with extraordinary consistency. The hardest $100,000 you'll ever earn is the first one. Because in the beginning, you're pushing the entire machine uphill by yourself. But once you reach financial escape velocity, progress stops depending entirely on your effort. Your assets begin creating assets. Your money begins creating money. And time finally joins your side. The first $100,000 was never the reward. It was the moment you stopped fighting gravity and started working with it. Because real wealth doesn't begin when you make your first 6 figures. It begins the day your money starts working as hard as you do. If this changed the way you think about building wealth, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.